They called me Scotland's savior, the man who defied an empire. But after Stirling, after every battle I fought in their name, it wasn't the English who captured me. It was my own countrymen. How does a nation forget the man who died for its freedom? September 1297. The screams at Stirling Bridge still echo in my skull. Not screams of agony, but of triumph. I can still see it. English knights drowning in their armor, their banners swallowed by the river's mud. We were farmers, blacksmiths, outlaws with pitchforks and rage, and we shattered the most feared army in Christendom. Scotland exploded, villages lit bonfires, women wept into their children's hair and whispered my name like a prayer. Men who'd hidden in forests for years emerged with weapons, ready to fight. For the first time since the English boot came down on our necks, we tasted what freedom felt like. Sharp, violent, and intoxicating. They made me guardian of Scotland. Me, a commoner. No royal blood, no title. Just a man who'd watched his wife hang from English rope and swore on her cold body that I'd burn their world to ash. And now I stood in halls built by kings, wearing the mantle of a nation's hope. But even as they cheered, I saw the rot beneath. The nobles stood in the back of every crowd, their applause hollow, their eyes cold. Lord after lord, men whose lands I just defended, studied me like I was a stain on their heritage. To them, I wasn't Scotland's salvation. I was an embarrassment, a peasant who'd risen too high, too fast, who'd made them look weak by doing what they never could. In the council chambers, they smiled with their mouths and plotted with their eyes. I'd see them huddle in corners, whispering behind jeweled hands. When I spoke of unity, of pressing our advantage, of driving Edward's forces from every inch of Scottish soil, they nodded. But their silence was louder than any battle cry. "Guardian Wallace," they'd say, their voices dripping with false reverence. "Perhaps we should negotiate terms with England, secure our positions before..." Before what? I cut them off, my fist slamming onto ancient oak tables. Before we finish what we started, before we prove that Stirling wasn't luck. They'd look at each other, never at me, because they didn't want freedom. They wanted safety. They wanted their titles back, their estates restored, their bellies full and their consciences quiet. They wanted to kneel to Edward and call it diplomacy. And I, the man who'd given them a chance to stand, I was the obstacle. I should have seen it then. The way Lord Cummin's jaw tightened when peasants cheered my name. The way Robert Bruce, young, ambitious, torn, avoided my gaze during strategy meetings. The way letters were sealed and sent south under cover of night. Even in victory, the poison was spreading. At night, I'd walk the castle walls and stare at the fires burning across Scotland. Not English fires anymore, but ours. Celebration fires, hope fires. And I'd feel it in my gut, that cold certainty that turns wine to ash in your mouth. This wouldn't last. Because I'd made one fatal mistake. I'd believed that men who'd tasted freedom would fight to keep it. That nobles who'd sworn oaths would honor them. That a country united by suffering could stay united by purpose. I was wrong. Freedom terrified them more than tyranny ever did. And somewhere in London, in a throne room drenched in candlelight and cruelty, Edward Longshanks was already smiling. He didn't need to defeat me on the battlefield. He just needed to wait for Scotland to devour itself. The council halls reeked of smoke, sweat, and ambition. I stood before men who called themselves Scotland's protectors, lords draped in furs and silver, their fingers heavy with rings paid for by peasant blood. They sat like kings in their own minds, and I was the inconvenient truth they couldn't swallow. "We must strike now," I demanded, my voice cutting through their murmurs. Edward's forces are scattered. His supply lines are broken. If we press forward... Press forward? Lord Cummin interrupted, his tone slick with condescension. With what army, Wallace? Your farmers? Your rabble? That rabble won Stirling. Silence. The kind that cuts deeper than steel. Robert Bruce shifted in his seat, his young face a battlefield of conflicting loyalties. I caught his eye. Saw something there. Belief, maybe, or guilt for what he was already planning. We need allies, another lord offered weakly. Negotiations with England could what? I slammed my fist down. Return your lands, your titles, while the rest of Scotland burns? They didn't flinch. They'd already made their choice. I was fighting for Scotland's soul. They were fighting for their estates. And in London, Edward knew it. He didn't send armies. He sent promises. Letters sealed with gold. Whispered offers of amnesty, land, power. He was a master of men's weakness, and Scotland's nobility was drowning in it. Somewhere in those smoke-filled chambers, as I pleaded for unity, they were already calculating the price of my head. There was a woman, a noble woman, whose name I'll never speak. She believed in the cause, in me. We met in shadows, her hands tracing scars on my skin, while she whispered warnings about the noble's treachery. They'll betray you, William, she breathed against my neck. Leave while you still can. But I couldn't leave, not when Scotland's freedom hung by a thread. Her protection would become my curse, her love, my liability. Even then, as I held her in the darkness, I felt the noose tightening. The nobles didn't need to defeat me in battle. They just needed to let Edward do it for them, and then claim they'd had no choice. I left those halls knowing the truth. I was already alone. Scotland's guardian, abandoned by Scotland itself. July 1298, Falkirk. The field stretched before us like God's judgment. English banners crowding the horizon, thousands of them, a sea of red and gold that swallowed the sky. Edward had come with his full might, knights in polished armor, Welsh longbowmen whose arrows could punch through oak, cavalry that shook the earth. I stood before my army, farmers clutching spears, blacksmiths gripping axes, men who believed that courage could overcome steel. Behind us, the Scottish nobles sat on horseback, their forces held in reserve, waiting. "Hold the line!" I roared as the English advanced. "Hold for Scotland!" They came like a tidal wave. Horses, steel, death. Our schiltrons, circles of spearmen locked shoulder to shoulder, held. We held. Men screamed and died and held anyway, because this was everything. This was our moment to prove Stirling wasn't luck. Then the arrows came, thousands of them, blackening the sky like a plague of locusts. They fell in waves, thunk, 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 into flesh, into bone, into the hearts of men who'd never seen war until they followed me. "Cavalry!" I screamed toward the nobles. "Now! Flank them now!" I turned, desperate, searching for the charge that would save us, and I watched them leave. Lord Cummin, the others, their banners turning, their horses retreating, their forces melting into the hills like cowards fleeing a sinking ship. Not defeated, deserting, abandoning us mid-battle while English steel closed in from every side. Robert Bruce remained frozen, his face a mask of agony. For one heartbeat, I thought he'd stay, thought he'd prove himself different. Then he turned his horse and followed them into the mist. Betrayal doesn't feel like a blade. It feels like drowning in air. The arrows kept falling. My men kept dying. The schiltrons collapsed into chaos, not from English might, but from that gaping wound the nobles left in our flank. We fought. God, we fought. But you can't win a battle when your own countrymen have already sold you. I survived, barely. Dragged from the field by hands I couldn't see, my armor drenched in blood that wasn't all mine. That night, I walked among the dead. Faces I knew. Boys who'd followed me because they believed. Men who trusted that Scotland's lords would fight for Scotland. I knelt in the mud and the blood and whispered to corpses, freedom betrayed by fear. Falkirk didn't break my body. It shattered something deeper, the belief that honor existed among men who wore crowns, that nobility meant anything beyond greed dressed in silk. Edward didn't defeat me that day. Scotland did. And as I stumbled into the forest, hunted and broken, I understood the cruel truth. I'd been fighting the wrong enemy all along. The English wanted to conquer us, but the Scottish nobles, they just wanted me gone. I became smoke. No castle, no army, no title, just a name whispered in terror by English patrols and Scottish traders alike. I moved through forests like a ghost, striking from shadows, vanishing before dawn. They called me outlaw, rebel, dead man walking. Let them. Every English garrison I burned, every supply line I severed, every collaborator I hanged from Scottish oak. It was a message carved in blood. I'm still here, but Scotland was dying around me. Villages I'd fought to protect lay in ashes. English soldiers dragged children from their mothers' arms, shackled them, shipped them south as slaves. I'd see bodies swinging from trees, men who'd cheered my name at Stirling, now rotting as warnings to anyone who remembered what freedom tasted like. The nobles had made their peace with Edward, bent the knee, kissed the ring, secured their precious lands while Scotland bled, and I was the ghost haunting their guilty sleep. One night in a burned chapel deep in the forest, Robert Bruce found me. He came alone. No guards, no banners, just a man drowning in the weight of choices that hadn't yet destroyed him but would. "William," he said, my name heavy in his mouth. I didn't turn from the fire. "Come to finish what Common started?" "I came to," his voice cracked, "to explain. Explain, Falkirk." I finally looked at him. Young, ambitious, broken. "Explain watching my men die while you rode away." "It wasn't," he started again. "Edward offers terms. If we submit, he'll what? Let you keep your title, your lands?" I laughed, bitter and cold. "And all it costs is Scotland's soul." Bruce's jaw tightened. "You don't understand politics, Wallace. Sometimes survival requires cowardice." I stepped closer. "That's the word you're looking for. You want a crown, Bruce. I can see it in your eyes. You want to be king so badly you'll sell every principle to get there." He said nothing. Couldn't. "Your crown will come," I told him, my voice dropping to something almost sad. "Edward will die. His son will falter. And you'll rise. You'll get everything you want." I leaned in close. Let him see the ruin behind my eyes. "But at the cost of your soul." He left without another word. I watched him disappear into the darkness, knowing he'd betray me again if it served his purpose, knowing every noble in Scotland would. I was alone, truly alone. My legend grew. My name became myth. But the man carrying it, exhausted, hunted, running out of allies, out of time, out of reasons to believe any of this mattered. Somewhere in London, Edward was patient. He didn't need to catch me. He just needed Scotland to do it for him. August 1305. The message came through a man I'd trusted, Sir John Menteith, a Scottish knight who'd fought beside me, who'd sworn oaths on his children's lives. "Wallace," the letter read. "Safe passage, a meeting, allies who still believe." I should have known. God, I should have known. But I was tired, so tired. Years of running, hiding, watching Scotland devour itself while I fought alone. Maybe I wanted to believe that somewhere, somehow, honor still existed. I went to the meeting near Glasgow, a barn, moonless night. Just me and the few men still loyal enough to die with me. Menteith was waiting, So were the English soldiers. I saw his face in the torchlight, not triumphant, not cruel, just empty. A man who'd made a calculation and decided I was worth less than Edward's gold. "I'm sorry, William," he whispered as they surrounded us. "Sorry. 30 pieces of silver. That's what Judas got. I never learned Menteith's price. Doesn't matter. Betrayal costs the same in any currency. Everything you were, sold for something you'll never be." They didn't fight me in open combat. They swarmed like rats, dragging me down, chaining me like an animal. My men died quickly, mercifully. I wasn't granted that kindness. Dragged to London in chains, paraded through streets as crowds spat and jeered. The Scottish rebel, the traitor. They threw rotted food, screamed for my death, celebrated like I was the villain in their story. Maybe I was. Maybe freedom always looks like treason to men who've learned to love their chains. The trial was theater, a show, Edward's final lesson to anyone who dare challenge kings. They accused me of treason against a crown I'd never bowed to, murder of men who'd slaughtered my people, crimes against an empire built on Scotland's corpse. "How do you plead?" the judge demanded. I looked at Edward, sitting cold and satisfied on his throne, at the nobles who'd condemned me, at the crowd hungry for blood. "I cannot be a traitor," I said, my voice steady despite the chains. "To a king I never called my own." The judge leaned forward. "Confess your crimes. Beg mercy from His Majesty. Submit, and your death will be swift." Submit. That word, that poison they kept offering like salvation. I thought of Stirling, of my wife's body hanging lifeless, of every man who died believing Scotland could be free, of Falkirk's betrayal, of nobles who'd sold their souls for comfort. I thought of what submission would mean, that they'd won, that everything I'd fought for was a lie. I met Edward's eyes and spat blood onto his pristine floor. "Freedom," I said through broken teeth. Edward smiled, not angry, satisfied. The rebel had finally become the lesson he'd always intended. "Take him," Edward ordered. "Show Scotland what happens to men who forget their place." They dragged me toward the scaffold, toward agony, toward an ending written in my blood. But I'd already won the only battle that mattered. I'd refused to kneel. August 23rd, 1305, Smithfield, London. They designed my death to be a masterpiece of suffering. Hung until nearly dead, cut down while still breathing. Castrated, disemboweled while conscious, forced to watch my own entrails burn, then beheading, quartering, my body parts sent to the four corners of Scotland as warnings nailed above city gates. Edward wanted to kill more than a man. He wanted to murder the idea. The crowd gathered like vultures, thousands of them, screaming for the blood of the Scottish savage. Vendors sold food. Children sat on their father's shoulders for a better view. This was entertainment. This was justice. They stripped me, chained me. The executioner approached with tools designed for maximum agony, minimum mercy. I won't describe the pain. Some things don't have words, but I'll tell you what I did with it. I screamed, not in agony, though God knows the agony was there. I screamed one word over and over, with every shred of breath left in my shredded lungs. Freedom! Again, louder. Freedom! The crowd fell silent. The executioner hesitated. Even Edward, watching from his platform, leaned forward. Because that scream wasn't begging. It wasn't surrender. It was defiance made immortal. They could break my body. They couldn't break what I'd become. Freedom. My last breath. My last word. My last gift to a nation that had betrayed me, but would one day remember why I died. Then silence. Edward won. He got his execution, his lesson, his warning to all of Britain. This is what happens to rebels. My head went to London Bridge. my limbs to Berwick, Stirling, Perth, Aberdeen, displayed like trophies, rotting above gates, a monument to empire's power. The Scottish nobles who'd betrayed me claimed their rewards, wore their crowns, slept in their castles, but they never slept in peace. Because something happened after Smithfield, something Edward couldn't kill with all his executioners and all his empire. My death became a rallying cry. The peasants remembered, the story spread. Wallace stopped being a name and became a symbol. Proof that one man could stand against an empire, could refuse to kneel even as they tore him apart. 23 years later, Robert Bruce, haunted, changed, finally understanding what I'd tried to tell him, would lead Scotland to independence at Bannockburn. He'd win his crown, but he'd carry my ghost forever. Edward's empire rotted from within. His son proved weak, his legacy crumbled, and me? I became eternal. Not the man. The man died screaming in London. But the idea, the belief that freedom matters more than survival, that some things are worth dying for, even when everyone you trusted sells you out. They called me traitor. History calls me martyr. Scotland calls me free. From glory to ruin. From savior to ghost. From guardian of Scotland to quartered corpse, rotting above English gates. My story isn't about victory. It's about the price of principle in a world built on compromise. I learned the cruelest truth a man can know. Freedom demands loyalty, yet loyalty is what men betray first. The nobles who swore oaths with me sold me for estates. The allies who fought beside me fled when courage became inconvenient. The nation I died for handed me to my executioners. Edward won the war. He got his execution, his lesson, his empire intact. But I won something he could never kill. The idea that submission is a choice, not destiny. They wanted me to kneel, to beg, to prove that every man has his breaking point. And maybe they were right about most men, but not me. I died branded a traitor in English law, a martyr in Scottish memory, and a warning to every empire that thinks chains can hold an idea. The nobles who betrayed me wore their crowns and lived in luxury. But they carried my ghost in every sleepless night, every moment they looked in mirrors and saw what they'd become. Freedom isn't about winning. It's about refusing to surrender what makes you human. I lost everything: my army, my allies, my nation, my life. But I kept my soul. And in the end, when empires turn to dust and crowns rust into nothing, that's the only victory that endures. They forgot the man. They'll never forget what he stood for.